We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners, Burke, Britton Financial Partners. So this is the Fine Answers podcast. Not sure what episode it is because they go out in very different orders. This is probably our first repeat guest. We have Shaun Cannon, CEO of Kids Plus, joining Peter Burke and myself. Shaun, I know you don't like talking about yourself, so I'm not going to make you do too much of that today. For anyone who wants to have a listen to our previous discussion with Shaun, check out episode 9, which was No Barriers to Participation. Shaun, welcome back to the Finances podcast.
G'day, Jay. Peter. Great to be back.
Lovely to have your smiling face back.
Thanks for the invite.
Now, mate, we've got a few things that we wanted to cover off on today, a few events that have either happened or some programs that are coming up. But for those that maybe want to listen to this episode as a standalone episode, can you give us a little high-level overview of Kids Plus?
Sure. So Kids Plus, Geelong-based organisation, we've been around for 20 years. This is our 20th anniversary, which is quite an achievement. Started back in 2003 by some local therapists and some families that were looking for specialist supports. At the time, in particular, for young people with cerebral palsy. And, over the next 2 decades, Kids Plus has kind of grown and we've started diversified into a few different things. But at our core, we're a specialist allied health provider. We provide physio and speech pathology and OT, social work and support coordination for infants, children, teenagers and young adults with a range of physical disabilities and neurodevelopment conditions. We're based out at Warm Ponds. We work with about 350 families across the broader Geelong region, and the team's about 35. So we're starting to kind of feel like a grown-up organisation.
20 years. Is there an anniversary date? Do you have a...
Don't have a particular date, but the occasion will be celebrated at the end of the year. And we're hoping to make that quite an occasion. It's something that well and truly should be recognised and celebrated.
Absolutely. It's been an incredible journey of growth from tiny idea to something pretty significant. Been fun to be observing a chunk of that.
Now, you've got a few events that are obviously the 20th anniversary celebration will be somewhere at the end of the year. You've got a number of events that are spread throughout the year and also a number of programs that you've got up and running. And maybe, Peter, you can talk on the programs in just a sec. Not necessarily any order. I thought we might start with what has been, which is the Kite Festival. I know that our last podcast was released just before the Kite Festival. How did that go? What was the outcome? Was it everything you wanted it to be?
Yeah, way back in November, but I remember it fondly. I remember kind of reflecting on it, and I think it's one of the most joyous days that I've ever been involved in. So the concept was that we just wanted a day for community participation, fully inclusive and accessible, that the community could get behind, whether there's a family with disabilities or not. And there's something, I think, quite beautiful in the simple art of getting together and flying a kite. So that was the concept, and we were blown away with the response that we got last year. Over the course of 2 or 3 hours, there was in excess of 1,000 people down at Rippleside flying a kite. And what was kind of great about it is that it wasn't as if, the young kids with disabilities had the spotlight put on them. It was just a day where everyone came together. No one was singled out. And, to some extent, it's representative of what inclusion and participation should look like. So we were thrilled with the response. We're really keen to make it an annual event and just continue to grow the festival.
And the weather was pretty good.
Weather was perfect. Yeah. A nice little breeze coming off the bay.
Coming, it was sort of a bit fluky, the breeze, wasn't it? It came and went.
Well, Rippleside's a bit hit and miss, isn't it? So,
but I think from my perspective, the points that you're trying to make, I was probably saying 3 things. One, it was just a beautiful day. It was a beautiful energy. It was a fantastic feeling down there. But that just not trying to be inclusive, but just participation, like that fact was great. But the numbers of people that were there just with smiles on their faces. And I know, like Delta from here brought down her family, husband and kids, and they had a ball. Like, it was just great. And wandering around, seeing the kids broadly, it didn't matter whether they were Kids Plus kids or their siblings or friends. Everyone was just having a good time. It was great, and it was a beautiful day to be part of. It was lovely to walk around and just be there and be in that energy. It was great.
It's really interesting, and you could see the smile on people's face when the kite goes in the air. You tend to forget.
Yes, simple.
So no, it was a great day, and if we can really embed it, that's what we're keen to do. I think it can be such a celebratory day for the Geelong region.
The third point I missed was, and I think you've said, it's not a day where you're trying to raise tens of thousands of dollars. It's a day that's making a statement. So, and I think that is the best part of it. It's not about trying to be funding some activity. It's just, of course, it's nice to make a couple of bucks, sell a few kites and have people donate a few dollars on the course of the day. But that wasn't the principal focus. No,
the focus is on coming down, fly a kite and hang out with others in the community. It's as simple as that. But it's proven to be really effective and, I think it's becoming or will become a really important day for Kids Plus and our families.
You mentioned it before, and you mentioned it in the previous podcast, and I've heard you say it a couple of times, and it resonated with me about kids with a disability not wanting to be in the spotlight. I'm not sure exactly I might maybe butcher your terminology, but you said that we don't necessarily need to put kids with a disability on a pedestal and make them superheroes. We want them to be included in everyday life as everyone else is. That's the aim. That
is the aim. It's about participation and inclusion. And often, the barriers that some of the young people that we work with is not their physical disability. It's the social kind of prejudices that we hold and are in place. So, we provide therapy, but really the therapy is just a means to an end. And, the end point is inclusion and participation along with everyone else. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, it's a pretty important way of viewing it. As we talk about inclusion, let's talk about some of the programs, some of the things that are actually in the winds at the moment. Peter, do you want to maybe touch on the scholarship program and Burke Britton's involvement with the Future Generation program and how that's built? I know we spoke about that on the last episode as well.
Yeah, well, I suppose it was a couple of years ago, Shaun, when we were chatting and you were talking about something that you thought would be a great idea. At a board level it was raised with us, and the possibility of creating a fund separate to just running programs, day-to-day programs, but something that's specifically designed to provide an opportunity for that young person who comes through year 12, and there should be no barrier for them going on doing some sort of tertiary degree of their choice. And it's really exciting to be part of that, and we're blessed, I think, because we've got the relationship with the Future Generation group, which allows us to direct some philanthropic funds. And I think we've jumped that fund up now to a couple of $100,000, and we should be able to, on an ongoing basis, grow that, but also provide a number of scholarships at the end of each year for the Year 12 graduates from Kids Plus.
Yeah, we're really excited by it, right? So I guess the intent behind it is that employment participation rates for those aged between 18 and 65 in the broader community is in excess of 80%. But for people with disabilities, that employment participation rate drops to around about 50%. Mm. And for people with multiple kind of complex disabilities, for example, if the young person is nonverbal, those employment participation rates drop down to 5%. So, to some extent, what the broader community is saying is that we're happy to provide funding for services and therapy and those sorts of things. But at this point in time, we're not really open-minded about providing pathways to employment. So Kids Plus has kind of been wrestling with, what's our role and responsibility in trying to shift that agenda? And we think that education can be one way of doing that. So, the scholarship program will offer a 4-year scholarship up to $10,000 to support a young person achieve post-secondary school qualification, whether that be a degree or a certificate or diploma or some other form of, formal study. Ideally, some of those young people will opt to pursue study in an allied health discipline because there is a bit of a drive to think how good it would be with young people with disabilities providing services and supports to other people with disabilities. As best we can, the service that we provide should be led by the participants receiving the service, and they should be led by their families. Mm. And I think an extension of that is that people with disabilities themselves then providing the services.
Providing the service, yeah.
So if the scholarship can be some kind of prompt or an incentive for a young person to contemplate or consider more study or a career in allied health, we think that'll be a wonderful outcome. Mm. And with, the significant funding that we've received already and with the corpus in place, the fund is only going to grow and grow over time. And we think that there is going to be no shortage of scholarships available for young people who attend Kids Plus. And when they get to that age of 18 or 19 or 20 and they're thinking about where to next, the opportunity to have some kind of discretionary funding that can either, subsidise their education or just their living or those sorts of things would be a great outcome. So we're really pleased about it. It's only been made possible through community support. And I guess that's one of the good things about being involved in an organisation like Kids Plus. We're reminded all the time that the broader community is generous and supportive of our work. And then it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we put it to good use, and we think that the scholarship fund is a really good use.
I was chatting to a few people last night at the P500 launch, and that was the general consensus. It was that we are blessed to live in this fantastic broader Geelong community, because there's a very genuinely community-based philanthropic thrust. I mean, we look across the number of organisations that have grown and developed in the Geelong region is quite extraordinary, and I think that's a credit to the Geelong community. And the extension of that is, if anyone's listening to this at any stage or knows somebody who's got the potential to use some philanthropic funds from business or personal stuff, give us a buzz and talk about the scholarship fund, because I'm a bit ambitious. I'd love to find over the next 2 or 3 years we've got $500,000 there, and there's absolutely no limit to the number of scholarships that can be provided for our young Year 12 graduates to get on and find a way to have an employment that will allow them to knock the hell out of that number we're talking about, 5%, 50%. There should be no reason they can't get a job in the workforce somewhere. Yep. And especially in allied health would be great.
How will applicants make use of the scholarship program? How will the decisions be made about who is awarded a scholarship?
So there's kind of minimal criteria. The only key criteria is that the applicant needs to have been a client of Kids Plus for at least 3 years. And then other than that, all they really need then is acceptance into a post-secondary school course. The funding can be used at their discretion, whether it be for their fees or their books or just cost of living. And it can be for the duration of their course up to 4 years. The application process is really simple. It's a case of it's a one pager. It tells about yourself and your interest in this area of study.
If you think about that, we take for granted that, Joe, you went through uni and you had your part-time job at the Diggers. You go through uni and have a part-time job, and then that helps you fund all the other stuff outside of what the uni costs and, the support from government. But that is, but a person coming out of the Kids Plus program, getting a part-time job is much more problematic, much less likely. So funding that sort of stuff is critical.
Yeah, no doubt, right? That's just the reality that we find ourselves in. The opportunities for the young people that we work with to get part-time paid employment is different to others. And the scholarship can be a way of kind of trying to even the balance.
Remove a barrier.
A little. So.
We might take a little segue. We're talking about the Geelong community. Let's extend that Geelong community out as far as the Surf Coast, and let's have a chat about what's coming up. You've got another event called the Surf Coast Trek coming up. I believe it's on the 13th of May. I believe I've been seconded into actually doing it through a few friends, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about that event and what that means to Kids Plus, Shaun.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're going to join us. It's a great day. So this year will be the 7th running of the Surf Coast Trek.
As long as it doesn't take me more than a day to do. If I have to carry UPB, it might be.
Yeah, well, there's a short course and the long course. There's a couple of alternatives.
You wouldn't let me do the short course, so I'm doing the long course.
No, that's good. So we do it in collaboration with Give Where You Live. We have from the outset. It's a great day. In essence, it's a 40k walk from Aries Inlet to Torquay. In the last couple of years, we've added a shorter walk, 26k's from Anglesey to Torquay.
For arthritic cripples like me.
It's got two purposes. It's a day of community participation, and then the other focus, unlike the Kite Festival, the Trek does have a focus on fundraising. So, what we ask is that we encourage each of the participants to try and raise $250. And we're enormously appreciative of those who do the walk and do commit to that fundraising target. It's our most significant fundraiser. On average, we raise about $100,000 each ourselves and Give Where You Live on the back of the Trek, which is really significant because then that just gives us discretionary spend that we can put into our service delivery. And in addition to that, it just kind of helps promote the work that we do. It exposes more people in the community to Kids Plus and Give Where You Live and the work that each of us are trying to do. And one of the best things is that really strong celebratory kind of community atmosphere at the finish line. It's a really enjoyable day, and it's I don't know, I still find it quite thrilling to see everyone cross the finish line and pat themselves on the back and get others to give them a pat on the back.
Other than the funds raised per participant, is there any other ways that people can, you said it's the major fundraiser, is there any other ways that people can contribute or help raise funds for the Surf Coast Trek?
So it's really participation's the key, and we've been fortunate that there's been a range of corporates that have sponsored the trek, many of those who have been with the trek from the start.
Do you want to give a couple of those a shout out?
So Coulter Legal, Port of Geelong, O'Malley Fitness. I'm going to forget some there, which...
Pretty special bloke, Mick, isn't he? Mick O'Malley.
Mick's been there from the start. Always really generous with his time.
Pretty sure Mick made us do that walk. But not only been half of it.
Yeah.
But,
when we were training, we could go.
Correct.
And there's been other Geelong organisations over the year, I think WorkSafe, TAC, and others at various points have supported the trek in their own way, which is, really energising and encouraging. So things are kind of wrapped up for this year, but in future, if anyone out there wanted to support the trek in the future, would be keen to have a chat.
I'm going to help you out with a couple of those other organisations, Shaun. We've got Bay 93.9, K-Rock 95.5, Coulter Legal you spoke about, Geelong Port, Hamlin, I assume that's Hamlin Homes, Pleasant, Ratio, Arthur Street, The Gordon, Total Care Podiatry, and Victorian Health and Fitness. They're the ones on the sponsors for this event.
For this year.
Yep.
There you go.
There you go. PB, you gonna make it or not?
Yeah, well, it's timed nicely because Esther and I are heading off to Spain on the 16th of May, so I've got no excuse. Last year, I think I was just about to go in for a major ankle replacement, so it wasn't possible, but I've got no excuse this year, so expect me to be there.
Very good. Talking of old sports injury, let's move on to the Sports Exchange. So this new initiative that is in the pipe at the moment, Shaun, do you want to touch on that and tell us a bit about it? I know nothing of this.
Yeah, so it's a concept at this stage, but we're making good progress on it. I thought it might be worthwhile just alluding to it. And, if anyone's listening out there that thinks there might be some synergies, we'd be keen to have a chat. So, in essence, we've been in discussions with Lifeline for a while now. And the concept is that we're looking to collaborate around a new social enterprise initiative. And in its simplest form, the concept is that we want to create what we've got the working title of a sports exchange. And the sports exchange will be modelled off, the highly kind of proven successful community op shop type retail outlet. But the sports exchange will focus exclusively on sporting equipment and sporting related apparel. And the sports exchange has two purposes. It's provide an opportunity for the broader Geelong region to access new or near new sporting equipment and apparel at heavily discounted costs. And the other focus is that we're hoping that in time the sports exchange can be a pathway for some of the young kids that we work with to get a gateway into supported employment. And once we get pilot up and running and we get a sense of how it's going, well then we may look to kind of expand the model. We think that it's a great opportunity to be able to kind of collaborate with an organisation such as Lifeline, one of Australia's most respected community organisations. And they know the ins and outs of running a community op shop as well as anyone. And Kids Plus, we're pretty good at working with young people with disabilities that might be looking for an opportunity. So,
how far away is the pilot, Shaun?
So it's dependent on some funding. So we're currently searching for some seed funding to help underwrite some of the risks. We're in discussions with some local organisations about an appropriate kind of retail outlet. Things are moving relatively well. All things going to plan. We're looking for a launch in the last quarter of this year. And then the plan is we'd kind of back ourselves to do a 3-year pilot and then, over the duration, start to get a sense, is this a viable model or not? We think it could be a winner, and we think that there's probably going to be no shortage of sporting clubs and associations, with all their members that will be in a position to be able to donate equipment and apparel. You can just imagine the amount of kind of surplus stock that is kind of sitting in garages, bedrooms and sheds all over the place. And we're having some conversations with some kind of national retailers that are potentially going to be in a position to donate us surplus stock and those sorts of things. So we think that the model might work. It's like most things. Sometimes you got to try it before you'll actually know for sure.
Suck it and see.
But that's the concept. And I guess you mentioned it today, one of the key things is that, if anyone is listening and has a potential connection or relationship to a sporting company or a sporting related retailer, and they may be looking for an opportunity to support two respectable community organisations, would be really keen to talk.
So this wouldn't necessarily be in conflict with or competition with the major sporting goods providers. For example, in Geelong, I'm just off the top of my head thinking about one opposite Geelong Footy Club, De Grandy's, who sell lots and lots of sporting goods. But if we're looking at stuff that's out of date, maybe marginally second-hand, still good quality stuff. So it's a different client base that we'd be appealing to. So therefore, a lot of those organisations could well be looking to pass on stuff that's, old models of things, out of date. I know we've been lucky enough in the past at the Bell Park Footy Club to pick up donations of footy boots, but they were footy boots that were old brands, old styles, of a brand that were able to be passed on to the young people there. So that sort of stuff. Anyone out there that's got that potential to say, well, I've got all this stuff that's excess stock. It's a lot of those things will go off into the sale bin, and what happens to them when they're not sold. So it'd be a great opportunity.
And the other thing probably just worth reinforcing is that in a typical kind of op shop, that'll usually be kind of staffed by about 40 volunteers. So over the course of the year. Now, if that 40 can be kind of translated into young people with disabilities, it does start to become a genuine
wonderful opportunity,
for potentially for some people to find their first opportunity for part-time work or some work experience. So that's the intent, and who knows where it might end up, but will be, if it gets off the ground, a kind of unique position in the marketplace, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
You mentioned the seed funding. Is that secured? You're still looking for it? Are you at liberty to talk about what kind of funds you're requiring, or do you prefer not to?
Yeah, so to kind of really underwrite the risk, we need about $120,000 a year over the 3 years. And the way in which we're approaching that at the moment is through some of the state-based philanthropic trusts. So we're in this process of discussions, application, submission, and then see the response. The conversations today have been pretty positive. Some of those trusts are kind of excited by, I guess, the uniqueness of the proposition. I guess they value the collaboration between two organisations. They like the idea that if it becomes self-sustaining, then it does become a long-term way in which you can provide employment for young people with disabilities. So we're optimistic, and we just got to see what happens.
Chip away.
Okay, cool. Peter, you mentioned something before we jumped on. I'm not sure whether Shaun was here. You're talking about the Changemakers Conference, which is, I believe,
a couple of weeks away, and I thought, Shaun, it might be just worthwhile just raising that as one of the major Kids Plus events, and just, maybe just give us I think a fortnight yesterday and today, a fortnight away. I know it's in my diary, so down at Torquay, but just the concept of and where it's going, and if anyone at this late time, is there still, some potential for grabbing a ticket to the conference?
Yeah, so the Changemakers Conference, second time that we're going to host it. Kids Plus, so our kind of, I guess our subline is, Centre for Therapy, Research and Training. And the conference kind of fits within that agenda. We're an organisation that ultimately is after influence, and I guess if you want to have influence, you've got to give yourselves the chance to be influential. And we think that the conference is one way of doing that. It's a conference that's targeting allied health professionals, participants, researchers, and their families. This nice kind of mix between clinical work, but also kind of more broader conversations around where's the sector going, what are the changes that we need to make, and why do we need to make them. So it's the focus is less on what we do and more on why we do it. So it's kind of got this really nice mix between, I guess, clinical discipline, but also conversations around activism and advocacy and how we can best represent the young people that we work with through our lens as a allied health provider. So it's 2 days down at the RACV. We've got a super agenda. We've got speakers from England, South Africa, the States, New Zealand, and from all across Australia. We've got about 160 coming. There's probably room for 20 or 30 more. So if anyone's out there and wanted to spend a couple of days down at the RACV in a couple of weeks, I'd really encourage you to think about it because it's a great agenda.
So kidsplus.org.au/changemakers takes you through to the Changemakers website, and you've got a plethora of speakers, international and keynote speakers, so it should be a good event. It's
been interesting getting the emails through with the speakers and their backgrounds, their resumes. Like, there's some pretty impressive people in the industry, and I'm looking forward to being part of it.
Yeah, it's a stellar lineup. And I guess one of the disappointments in more ways than one is that Judy Heumann was due to give the opening keynote, and some of the listeners may know, many may not, but Judy is one of the pivotal figures in the disability rights movement in the United States. Her, with her colleagues, essentially kind of led that disability civil rights movement in the 1970s, and she carried it on through the remainder of her life. And she unfortunately passed last week at the age of 75, but she had the most remarkable life, and she made the most remarkable difference for people with disabilities. So enormously sad that we don't get the opportunity to engage with her at the conference, but nevertheless, it is worth, I guess, noting the wonderful contribution that she made.
That probably brings us to the end of this discussion. Shaun, is there any other closing comments, any other calls to action to the listeners out there? We've covered off on the scholarship program, the Surf Coast Trek, the Kite Festival, the Sports Exchange, Changemakers Conference. Is there anything we haven't covered off on that you'd want to let people know about?
That's a pretty full list, but it would be remiss for you not to just, again, thank you and Peter and Burke Britton for everything that you've been able to do for Kids Plus. Been great supporters of Kids Plus now for a number of years, which we're enormously appreciative. It kind of extends through the relationship that you have with the Future Generation Group, but it makes an enormous difference to our work. So I guess on behalf of all of us at Kids Plus, enormous thanks.
Thank you, Shaun. And well done, Peter. We managed to stop you for talking for more than an hour and a half today.
Kept biting my tongue.
All right. Thanks, Shaun. Look forward to having you on a third time in the near future. Thanks again.
Thanks heaps, Shaun. It's great to chat as always, mate.
Good on you. Thanks.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Burke Britton FP, or Google Burke Britton Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to, don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility. Do your homework. Ask questions and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PP Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britton Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.